In the middle of the cold, churning waters of San Francisco Bay sits a fortress carved from rock and wrapped in legend. Alcatraz, the prison America once called escape-proof. A place designed to break the spirits of the most desperate, violent, and determined inmates the country had ever seen. Yet behind its iron bars and concrete walls lies a story far more complex than simple confinement. Alcatraz was not just a prison. It was a psychological battlefield. An island of isolation where danger, ingenuity, and desperation collided. And despite every guard, every gun tower, every siren, and every inch of freezing water surrounding the island, men still tried to escape. Some failed instantly. Some vanished without a trace. Some became myths whispered through and one attempt, the most famous of all, still hangs over American history like a shadow with no clear shape. But to understand how these escape attempts became legends, we must step inside the damp corridors, among the echoing footsteps and creaking metal, and into the minds of inmates who believed that surviving the currents, the cold, and the dark might be their only chance at freedom. Welcome to Hidden Yes. This is episode 26. Alcatraz: Secrets of the Escape Attempts. Alcatraz's long history of escape attempts begins with desperation and ends with unanswered questions. From the moment the prison opened in 1934, escape was inevitable. The isolation, the harsh conditions, and the reputation of the island all fueled the belief that getting out, somehow, might be possible. Early attempts were chaotic and doomed, like the inmate who tried to hide in a laundry bag, or the prisoners who sprinted toward the shoreline only to be shot before they could reach it. But as the years passed, the attempts grew more elaborate, more coordinated, and more daring. One of the most violent attempts came in 1946 during what became known as the Battle of Alcatraz. 6 inmates overpowered guards, seized weapons, and engaged in a 2-day standoff that left officers and prisoners dead. Gunfire echoed across the bay. Battleships positioned themselves offshore, and smoke rose from the supposedly impenetrable prison. In the end, the inmates who initiated the uprising were either killed or executed. But the event proved something chilling. Even under maximum security, Alcatraz could be breached from the inside. But the most infamous escape attempt came in 1962 and remains the deepest mystery in the island. Es history, the escape of Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers, John and Clarence. These men were smart, quiet, observant, and incredibly patient. Over months, they scraped through the decaying concrete of their cells using spoons, homemade drills, and stolen tools. They built a workshop, hidden above the utility corridor. They crafted a raft and life vests out of raincoats, sealing them with prison glue. They sculpted dummy heads out of soap, cement dust, newspaper, and paint, complete with hair stolen from the barber shop, to fool guards during bed checks. And on a cold June night, they climbed through the air vents, crawled across the roof, and slipped into the dark waters of the bay. When guards discovered the escape the next morning, panic rippled through the prison. The FBI launched one of the largest manhunts in its history. The raft was never recovered intact. The men were never found. Official reports leaned toward drowning, citing the brutal currents and near-freezing water. But over the decades, scattered evidence unconfirmed sightings, letters, photographs, and claims made by the Anglin family kept the possibility of survival alive. The truth remains locked between title charts, old case files, and the silence of the cold Pacific. What makes the 1962 breakout so haunting is that it wasn't just an escape. It was an engineering masterpiece, built in total secrecy inside the most secure prison in America. Investigators later discovered the planning had been meticulous. Lists of stolen items, tools made from vacuum cleaner parts, a small accordion used as a pump for the makeshift raft. Even the ventilation shafts, once believed to be too small for escape, were widened just enough through months of chipping. How no God heard them remains an unanswered question. Maybe it was the constant noise of the prison. Maybe it was luck. Or maybe, as some historians suggest, the guards underestimated the quiet intelligence of men who had spent their entire lives studying the cracks in every system. Other escape attempts at Alcatraz carried their own mysteries. In 1937, inmates Theodore Cole and Ralph Rowe vanished during a foggy evening. They squeezed through a window bar they had sawed through, made it to the water, and disappeared. Officials believed they drowned, but no bodies were ever recovered. In 1958, inmate Aaron Burchett vanished during a work detail near the shoreline. A body believed to be his washed up weeks later, but some questioned whether it was truly him. And in 1962, just months before the Maurice Anglin escapade, inmate John Paul Scott made it further than anyone confirmed. He used inflated gloves as flotation devices and actually reached the San Francisco shore, only to collapse from exhaustion and hypothermia. His survival proved something important. Escape from Alcatraz wasn't impossible, just nearly impossible. Even today, the currents surrounding Alcatraz remain treacherous. The water temperature can drop below 55 degrees, cold enough to paralyze muscles within minutes. The tides shift unpredictably, creating whirlpools and rip currents. Sharks exist in the bay, though typically they are smaller species that pose no threat. Yet the myth of sharks added psychological terror for inmates. Guards knew all this. That's why they believed the water itself was the prison's strongest wall. And maybe it was. Or maybe someone, someday, found the one perfect tide that could carry a determined swimmer across the bay. That possibility is what keeps the 1962 escape alive. Today, Alcatraz stands as both a historic site and a monument to uncertainty. Tourists walk the narrow cell corridors, hear the metal gates slam, and feel the weight of isolation. They listen to audio tours where former guards recount terrifying nights, and former inmates describe how they mapped every inch of the island in their minds. They stand in front of the cells Morris and the Anglin brothers escaped from and stare at the rough holes carved into the walls. They look at the workshop where the raft was built. They stand on the shoreline and imagine that final moment, three men stepping into icy black water, hoping the currents would carry them to freedom. Whether they survived or not, their story remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in American criminal history. Alcatraz could contain men, but it, Coolden Tea, contained questions. In the end, Alcatraz is a story about determination. It's about men facing an island designed to break them, yet still finding cracks in its armor. Some escape attempts ended in gunfire, others in tragedy, and one in legendary uncertainty. The island remains a place where whispers echo louder than the waves, where the line between fact and possibility blurs in the cold fog drifting across the bay. And as long as the truth about the 1962 escape remains hidden beneath those dark waters, Alcatraz will continue to be more than a prison. It will be a symbol of mystery, an unsolved chapter in American history where the final page has never been found. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next dive into America's hidden history. See you next time.